This episode, sadly to say, was my least favorite one. Now, before you get upset, just give me a few minutes here to explain why. I want to preface this by saying that I wouldn't call the episode bad. I was entertained by what I was seeing, liked what they did with some of the characters. I thought the jokes were good for the most part. I do think this was probably the funniest episode. It's just that from a storytelling standpoint, this episode really didn't hit the mark. This episode is called The People versus Emil Blonsky. So, as you would expect, this episode is covering the parole of Emil Blonsky that was mentioned in the previous episode. And then there's a B storyline also that takes a couple side characters we've met throughout the series and puts them in a legal setting together, and there's a thing there going on. And Jessica Gao, the head writer on this show, was correct when she said that no one in the writer's room can write riveting legal scenes, because neither of these legal sequences were that riveting. Actually, I would argue they weren't at all riveting. In fact, I think they knew they weren't riveting because usually what we see is the start of the case, a tad bit in the middle, and then we see the end. Like they cut out the case entirely. It seemed like what someone with a very surface level understanding of legal scenes would write, and I find it weird that, like, in a world where legal dramas are so hot right now, and some of the best shows ever created are legal dramas, you have hours upon hours upon hours of research. It's not just average research, it's some of the most well-written research out there. And you can't even get half as good as those. It also, when you cut out that much of legal scenes to really just kind of get to the point, it also removes all sense of tension from them, because any opportunity to have a big twist that completely changes the angle of the case is removed. Remember in Daredevil when we got an episode that was just on the Punisher's court case, and you thought it was going really well for Matt and Foggy until the Punisher came in and had his little emotional meltdown and completely changed the trajectory of not just that episode, but also of Nelson and Murdoch, his own character, and the rest of the series? I wasn't expecting that from She-Hulk, but I was at least expecting some twist. And I never got that. It just felt like everything was going well the entire time. It felt like everything was going the way it was supposed to, and we never truly had any conflict. Although I will say the B storyline of this episode was entertaining as crap to me. Whenever it took a break from the She-Hulk Abomination stuff, that's where I was really digging this episode. The guest star of this episode should not surprise anyone. It's Wong. Wong shows up in this one, and it's always nice to see Wong. I love Wong. Wong's one of the best characters, so whenever he was on screen talking, loved it. Although, when he shows up, the timeline of the MCU gets vastly more complicated. I need the person whose job it is. So there was an article that Marvel has a person on staff whose sole job is to just be the timeline keeper. They're basically the He Who Remains of real life. I need them to tell me when the hell this show takes place. In fact, I don't think the writers know when this show takes place, so let me break this down for you. Last episode, they had footage of Abomination cage fighting. Now, this show is supposed to take place sometime after Shang-Chi, not during Shang-Chi. And in Shang-Chi, Bruce's arm was hurt. So it's like, explain where you're getting the cage fight footage from. Then Jessica Gao was like, oh, the cage fight footage isn't new footage, it's newly discovered footage. I'm like, fine, makes sense, I can roll with that. But then this episode, oh yeah, and then Shang-Chi is supposed to take place before No Way Home. But Wong shows up and makes a mention of something I'm assuming is supposed to be referencing Spider-Man No Way Home. So when does it happen? When does this show take place? Explain it to me. Like I'm 5, preferably. I will say something that blew my mind. Post-credit scene. Shit was gnarly, and my She-Hulk simping ass loved it. I do think this show is at its best when it's playing with just the most obscure, fun, and wacky characters. This episode gives us a shape-shifting elf. It's not a scroll, it's something completely different. They explain what it is. I won't get into that here, but that character is in this, and basically, that character's sole purpose is to bother other people. And I didn't think I would get as big of a kick out of it as I did. A third of the way through this show, however, and we still have no idea as to what this is all building towards. We don't have any hint of an overarching plot line. We have no hint. We have, no D's of a main villain. Sure, the end of this episode sets up that there's someone behind the scenes, but we're almost halfway through the show. We haven't seen that person yet. Usually a show's going to give you your main villain by this point. Apparently, unless you're a Marvel Disney Plus show, and we still have not seen that villain. And they keep introducing all these characters. I mean, we've gotten Hulk, Titania, who I thought was going to be more important than she is, has popped up. Abomination, Wong, so many side characters. And we haven't even seen Daredevil yet. And the one question I can ask is, where is all of this going? I don't even know if there would be a point in me doing a spoiler section of this video, because there really isn't anything more to talk about that I haven't already talked about. There's no big reveals, no big scenes involving certain characters that I need to really dive into. So I honestly might just skip it. You guys can watch the episode on your own and see. It's Jennifer trying to get Abomination out of prison. That's really just the episode, and there's nothing more for me to really dive into there. I was entertained by this episode, sure. I do think She-Hulk is a great character. Abomination stealing the spotlight. It's always great to see Wong. That Beast storyline, I really enjoyed. I thought that was pretty funny. But this episode really seems like it's story without conflict. The biggest piece of conflict in this episode is that Wong is late to a meeting. Alright, I'm going to say one spoiler. One spoiler, then the video's over. That She-Hulk twerking thing with Megan Thee Stallion, goddamn.